Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my gosh, that was perfect. That was just like at school. I'm a 22-year veteran school teacher. My name is Representative Sonia Galaviz. I am from Idaho. I grew up in the Panhandle, but feels like a lifetime ago I worked and lived down here. I taught at Central Elementary that I drove by where it was just for nostalgia's sake. I'm like, there, yeah. It was a cool old building, but you have an incredible new space, and so it's nice to be back down here in a community that I lived in and loved very much, the families that I served and the kids that I taught. And so I'm here today to moderate this Jerome Town Hall Save Our Schools. And I want to give an overview of what it's going to look like, how the town hall is going to go, and then I'll introduce our panel. So we are here primarily to discuss the voucher bill that is now a law. It was House Bill 93, which created a $50 million voucher that will allow public tax dollars to go to private institutions. So I want to make sure that when we are talking about this bill and maybe others like it, that when we say voucher, so the word voucher is an umbrella term that refers to any program where public dollars go to a private institution. So depending on the state, that might be an education savings account, it may be a legitimate voucher that you would take, and in our state it is a tax credit, so the term voucher refers to public dollars going to private schools. I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of it as well, just so we're talking about the same thing. So House Bill 93 put $50 million forward to be able to give a credit to folks based on their educational expenses. That may be curriculum materials, that may be tuition. And so that will be something that when they go to file their taxes, and this part is important, it is a refundable tax credit. So how does that differ between a non-refundable tax credit? So a refundable tax credit means that it can take your tax limit down to zero and then beyond. So if the tax credit is more, technically, than you owe, if you're at zero but there's still more in the credit that you would qualify for, you will get a refund. So a non-refundable may take you down to zero, but you don't get more than that. So I just want to make sure we understand the mechanics of it. Now, there is no household cap on House Bill 93, now law, meaning if you have two kids that are in private schools, you would qualify for $5,000 each. And if your child is special needs or has some additional needs and is on an IEP, an individualized education plan, then you can qualify for $7,500. One caveat there, just as a public school teacher, we have seen our school districts, not only in the Treasure Valley, but in eastern Idaho and central Idaho, where we have families that were in private schools or in home schools coming to the public school district for qualifications for an IEP. So we need to remember that public schools have a constitutional obligation to serve students with special needs, but to qualify for $7,500 tax credit, your child needs to be on an IEP. So that is something where we're seeing public schools now start to qualify and identify for those families to be either homeschooled or access those funds in a private school. So this voucher program will be administered by the Idaho Tax Commission, which may seem strange, right? A tax commission administering an education program. But because it's a tax credit, it'll go through the commission. The commission currently has a 2% audit rate. So that'll be some of the conversation tonight about where that oversight and accountability comes when we don't have the mechanism, the staff, or the support to do some of that auditing. When this was happening, when House Bill 93 was making its way through the State House, we had profound response from the community. Lots of folks came out, emails, phone calls, testifying in the committee hearings, lots of conversations in the hallways. There were folks that were meeting down at the State House, letting your elected representatives know how you felt. when it came time where it had passed through both chambers and it had gone to the governor. The governor put out a request and just said, if you called in, because the volume of calls was profound, and he said, if you call in, it was an automated answering machine, if any of you called. And it said, okay, if you want me to veto, press 1. If not, press 2, as simple as that. Well, through a public records request by journalists, it was about 37,000 Idahoans called in. And they removed for duplicity and made sure that those were single household calls, 37,000, of which 86%, 32,000 folks said no, veto it. So here we are, right? So this is the conversation. And so with Save Our Schools and the good folks who volunteered to be on this panel and our elected officials that are in the room, we're here to have a community conversation about it. What it's going to mean for our schools, some real potential pitfalls coming forward, but what's going to be my favorite part of these conversations is actually hearing from you. And so after we hear from our panel and give some questions that were sent when you pre-registered, we'll also take questions from the audience. Now, we've got some helpers around that have these cards because just the number of people that are in the room, we're doing it kind of city club style, and then folks will bring them up. So I know there was a concern that, well, will they take a question if it's not leaning towards the discussion they think is going to be had here tonight? And so as a school teacher, as someone who believes in sensible politics, and as someone who is committed to us learning how to disagree better, I promise that we will take questions from all angles and that we will make sure that we answer thoughtfully and that we remain open to ideas and open to this conversation, and that the tone of the town hall will be respectful and we'll engage in civic discourse just like we would want our children to do, just like we would want our elected officials to do. So with that, I want to make sure that I let you know who is on our panel today. So today we have Liz Bingham, who is the Vice Chair of Jerome School District Board of Trustees. Born and raised in Wisconsin, she is the youngest of 7 siblings. She met and married her husband, Cody Bingham, while completing her Bachelor's of Science in Ag Education from Utah State in 2007. Together they have 4 boys. Cody and Liz farm sugar beets, corn, barley, wheat, alfalfa, and seed carrots north of Jerome. Liz loves serving in her local community, and having spent 3 years on the Jerome County Fair Board, 4 years with the Jerome School District Foundation Board, and the last 6 years as a biotechnology spokeswoman for the American Sugar Beet Growers Association, she is anchored into this community here. So let's welcome Liz to the panel. Next, we have Rachel Duvall. She got her start in the Jerome School District in 1999, shortly after earning her master's in social work in 1996. What began as a grant-funded partnership with Health and Welfare, serving only Jefferson Elementary, quickly blossomed into a lifelong passion dedicated to strengthening public education. When that program's funding ended in 2001, she embraced a supervisor role in the day treatment program, supporting students entangled in the juvenile justice system, facing expulsion, or at risk of gang involvement. In 2011, she transitioned in her current role as district social worker. As she approaches her 27th year in public education, she remains unshakable in her commitment to students, families, and educators. Please welcome Rachel. And last but not least, Alexis Morgan is a passionate champion of creating collaborative school communities and a dedicated leader in Idaho's education sector. She just finished her term as president of the Idaho PTA and is the host and founder of Our Kids, Our Schools, a podcast and organization focused on building strong school communities. Alexis is also a PhD student at Boise State studying public policy and administration, holds a master's in adult organizational learning and leadership from the U of I, and she earned her undergrad degree in history and geography teaching at Brigham Young University. Welcome, Alexis. Okay, panel, I'm going to give each of you about 3 minutes to either introduce yourself or kind of give us your opening thoughts, and then we'll head into some of those questions. Alexis, would you mind starting?
Okay, maybe the volume. I'll make sure to speak up. Thanks, Sonia. Thanks everyone for being here today. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate when people come out to gather as a community and to learn. So when I was the president of Idaho PTA, and we are a nonpartisan organization that started in 1905, formed by mothers around the state, as far east as Idaho Falls, as far north as Lewiston at the time, came down to Boise because they wanted to speak up on behalf of their children and children in their communities. And that is what this association has done for the last 120 years. This year we celebrate 120 years. And so last year I was able to travel the state and meet with a lot of parents, a couple school board members, and some administrators. And I want to tell you that those mostly parents had kind of two things that they really wanted lawmakers or their local communities to address. One, they wanted people to be aware that technology was an issue. They said, we really want you to address technology. Got it, check, I'll do that one. Then they said, the other thing we really want to work on is a relationship with our administrators. We've got some issue with that. Check, great, I'm gonna work on that. No one said anything about vouchers to me. No one said anything about vouchers. Parents do want a seat at the table. We do believe that there is growth and space for that in education here in Idaho. But we don't believe that that's vouchers. And we as parents, as the association, were really disappointed this past year when we were not invited to the table and when we saw the outcome that we did. So I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to talk about that today, to talk about how this moving forward is going to impact Idaho and impact our Idaho kids, because as adults who are here, it's important for us to make sure that we're speaking up on behalf of our Idaho kids. So thanks so much for being here.
I'm going to stand up just so I can see who's all here with us today. And I did spill water on myself. I was hoping to hide that. Never mind. I have Gayla Otto to thank. If any of you in this audience know her, she's a past longtime school teacher with the Jerome School District. She was the one that said, hey, you should fill out this application and become a school board member. So I thank Gayla for this opportunity and the chance that I have had to learn about our district, to get involved, to see things that I would not have seen just as a regular parent in this district. And I'll try to bring out some of those examples as we talk today. I view education much like I do agriculture, as I went around and was teaching multiple audiences about biotechnology in our sugar beets, the science behind what we do on farms. I view agriculture that we need all forms of agriculture to feed the world. Organics, hydroponics, you name it. And I feel the exact same way about education. We need online charter schools. We need public schools. We need private schools. We need hybrid mixes, things that we'll talk about school choice. We need all of those things to educate our children. And but there are ways that we go about this to make sure that we are accountable to our members, to our taxpayers, to the people within our individual districts. And I did not feel that House Bill 93 covered the accountability piece, especially when I'm in the schools. I see the amount of paperwork that our special education teachers have to fill out, everything that they have to document, trace. I go over to our business manager and I see all the things that he has to keep track of and document, and then to just say, here, have this money, take it and run with it, do what you want with it. And if you decide this doesn't work for you, your kids can come back to the public school. And now we have no money to take care of those students. It's gone. It's been used in other ways. So that is why I'm here today, and I will elaborate more as we go through.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Rachel Del Valle. I know a few of you in this room. I've worked, as they said, for Jerome School District going on my 27th year. I was actually hired across the street at Central Elementary in the basement by Jim Cobble and Dale Lane, legends in our town. And I started on a grant. And Dale told me right away, it wasn't going to last. We're only going to keep you a year, Rachel. We'll try to find a place for you. So as you know, mental health, social workers that dive deep into kids with disabilities and support those families typically run on grants. Our schools and our funding typically are at the bottom, and we don't put funding into those places. I've lived here almost longer than I lived in Lewiston, Idaho, and this has become my hometown. And I believe in rural school districts, and I believe in the teachers and the staff that supports our rural school district and in public education. I too had my own children graduate from Jerome High School. I have a special education teacher in my family now. I have a soon-to-be nurse in my family now, and I have a wildland firefighter currently working this summer. And they all are products of Jerome School District and public schools. And what I will tell you is we have some of the best teachers in the state of Idaho, if not the nation, who work hard every single day for every single child that comes through that door. If it wasn't for Mr. Clark, my JW wouldn't have been seeking a job in nursing. If it wasn't for Mrs. Nicholson, my daughter wouldn't have wanted to be a special education teacher. If it wasn't for Mrs. Bailey taking care of my baby boy, he wouldn't have been as successful as he is up at University of Idaho. It's the teachers in our community and the infrastructure that makes us who we are in Jerome proud, and it is the heartbeat of Jerome. The gym out there that we just built, where we have FFA celebrations and we have funerals of the people that built Jerome. That is our town. And so I feel like public schools are a place worth saving, and they're a place worth working on. I can't tell you every aspect of that bill today, but I can tell you about the little blue and brown eyes I see in public schools that want our support and need our help. And every single teacher I work with does everything they can to help get those kids through school. And we feed the kids, we educate kids, and we love kids. And so we need to find places for all of them in our public schools. And we need all kinds of things, and I agree with Liz. We need all kinds of places for kids to be. So I'm not here to talk negatively about charters or about private schools. My own children went to a private school, through kindergarten. And it helped us because we didn't have full-time kindergarten at the time, and now we do have full-time kindergarten. And as a social worker and their father who was a firefighter, we couldn't afford private school, but we needed them in a place where they could be taken care of. And they did a really good job too. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for that opening and your comments. I'm going to pitch a couple of questions that came in through the Eventbrite, or questions that we've heard come up again and again at the other town halls. So during the hearing for this bill, sitting in committee or even on the floor and me listening to our legislators, we had elected representatives and senators feel resigned for voting for it, like it was inevitable. And even though that they had very large percentages of their community reach out and say, no, we don't want this, they felt like there were some powers tying their hands. So Alexis, would you talk to us a little bit about what those powers are that apparently tie the hands of our legislators and even our governor from either in-state or out-of-state, what groups?
Yeah, so I think it's important to Sonia's question, this isn't coming from in our state. This is coming from outside of our state. And this is a movement. Vouchers have been a movement that have been going on for decades. And this movement is funded by billionaires who have a personal interest in educating a specific population and wanting those students to be in specific schools. And so what we're seeing is that these outside dollars start in different states, and they have made their way around many different states around the United States, and you could go look up which ones those are. And so vouchers have been something that have been trying to make their way into Idaho for years. And what's interesting is that when we look at the history of vouchers, it is not a political movement. It started with different people in different political parties. So I think that's something just to remember just in terms of vouchers in general. And so for X number of years, there has been pressure from outside of the state to come into Idaho. And a lot of Idaho education people, pro-education people have been keeping those powers, kind of that pressure outside of the state. Unfortunately, this year, a lot of outside money came inside the state. And a lot of our lawmakers it really was the Republican Party felt a lot of pressure because specific leaders nationally and in some other places around the state put a lot of pressure on our lawmakers to vote a specific way. And so that's something that for me as an Idahoan, I try to remember that even though I don't like the outcome of this, and some of the lawmakers that I respect voted for this, I have to remember that for me as Alexis, that wasn't a role that I played. I didn't sit in that seat. I'm also very grateful for our lawmakers who took the courage, they took the courage to say, no, I'm not going to vote on behalf of a political party. I am going to vote on behalf of Idaho and what Idaho needs.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Alexis. So when we're talking about this just passed, right, it's just going into effect. Currently, our first voucher bill is capped at $50 million, so there's a cap. After it passed, we had, I believe it was a tweet put out by a voucher advocate and a former representative that basically said, well, we can remove the cap, and I'm going to ask for a declarative judgment to have the cap removed. And so if we remove the cap, suddenly 50 million becomes closer to 300 million if you remove the current cap on it, because it would be access to everyone that's currently in private schools. And so that's that expansion that we're talking about, of the threat of expansion. And so Liz, could you talk to us if this expansion could happen in Idaho?
Yes, it can happen here. We have examples in other states. Arizona is one of them that's probably the most in the news. But I've been focusing lately on Utah because Utah is a fairly new adoption of a similar bill. Theirs is called, let me pull it up, the name of it real quick. Utah, okay. Utah Fits All Scholarship. And so you can look up in the Salt Lake Tribune, they have all their numbers. When they started, they're in their second year of the program. They started at $42 million. This past year, it was $82 million. And before the end of the legislative session, another $20 million was approved for the following year. So by their third year, they're already into $100 million from where they started at 42. So the likelihood of that happening here with the current legislature that we have is a yes. It will happen.
Thank you. Rachel, expanding on that, how do you feel like an expansion, if that were to happen, how would that affect Idaho taxpayers and our public schools?
I think my focus in speaking today is on sorry, I'm not used to standing and delivering. I should. I I think my focus today is speaking on behalf of, special education and how that would affect the tax dollars. $7,500 per kid for special education to go into private school. What would that $7,500 do for public education if we put it back in our schools? What could it do for the kids we work with every day in our populations? Those are the questions that I would ask. We're mandated federally by the state, and we have a lot of accountability in special education. And as Liz mentioned earlier, the paperwork that we go through to maintain that accountability to our parents, to our students, and making sure they get their needs met every single day. So my concern, I guess, going forward as far as tax dollars, if we had $7,500 per student that we were getting in public education for special education, what could we do for them? Right now we're struggling as it is for, speech therapists, psychs, social workers, in order to maintain those services for students. Special education isn't a field people often go to. It's hard. So the tax dollars, $7,500, what could we do in Jerome in our public schools if we had that money?
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Just to give another example to feed off of what Rachel just said, another Salt Lake Tribune article, just at the end of this year, the State Department went in and audited the kids who are in the program, saying that, they took the funds. Of those students, 877 of them were found in the public schools. So I did the math on that. They come in at $8,000. Ours start at $5,000. And then if you're special needs, you can go up to $7,500. $8,000, 877 kids doesn't sound like a lot, but that amounts to $7 million. $7 million that those public schools that they attend don't have those funds, yet they still have to educate those kids. So just to give you a brief snapshot of how quickly that money snowballs and how important it is and the things we could do with that money. So it's why it's so important to us and why we feel like we have to fight for every dollar all the time, every legislative session as a public school district.
This moderator will take a privilege just to talk about special education in the state of Idaho, because I've taught a very long time. And we've got kiddos that they take different resources. They take a different personnel, different expertise, and different money to be able to serve all of our kids. So I will remind us that the constitutional obligation for serving students with special needs resides with the public schools. Now, I have colleagues and friends and people that I love who teach in private schools, and they're incredible. It is not that a private school sits around and thinks about how they can deliberately discriminate against a child with special needs. That would be ridiculous. But the reality is they often do not have programs, staff, infrastructure, the actual materials, the utility needed to be able to serve some of our more needier kiddos. And so because of that, we see that cost and that obligation resides with the public schools. And to these two ladies' point, talking about the needs of our special education students across the state, we currently operate with $80 million less from the state than what is needed. And just so we thread the needle with this, here's what happens if a school district has more cost for their special education student than they're funded for. They don't get to say, well, Johnny's not coming to this school because he needs a one-on-one, he needs a hospital bed, he needs, etc., personal care. We don't get to say that. So a school will have to pull from discretionary, operational, they'll have to move the chips around to find a way to fund what is needed for that child because we have a constitutional obligation to do so. So I just want to make sure we're clear, and that goes to, if somebody asked the question of how can private schools provide this care. They don't have to. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to. I want to be clear because I know we've got private school folks in the room that care deeply about their kids and their community and their families, and we want to be respectful of that. But they do not have to. and they can deny enrollment based on the special needs of a child because they can't serve them. So, second round of questions. So when we're talking about House Bill 93, now law, you have some folks that laud it as a huge accomplishment at step forward in school choice, which you talked a little bit about, where we have all different kinds of options in school. But then you have folks on the other side that talk about it's a wealth redistribution formula, a government subsidy, and especially to your point, Rachel, talking about rural communities, and our rural folks are subsidizing urban centers or where we find the most private schools. So with that, Alexis, I'll start with you. So this notion of school choice. Did Idaho have school choice before this bill passed? And would you agree with the supporters' assessments of it? Did we have school choice?
So this is one of my favorite questions. Thanks for asking me to answer this. So do we have school choice? Yes, Idaho has school choice. Idaho, just so everyone is aware, is a national leader in education school choice. You can go to the governor's website. I have several times. Governor Little on his website has a page devoted to how many school choice options Idaho has. Get ready for it. 9. We have 9 school choice options. And some of those are a little bit more like a strategy. He kind of works in some strategy there, but he does share there are 9 school choice options in Idaho. So I think that this I feel that this bill, when it was run during the legislative session, was intentionally deceptive. It was intentional to say, this is a school choice option. Wrong. We already have school choice option. This bill was intended to be a wealth distribution. In the voucher world, this is known as a welfare for the wealthy. That's one of the phrases that they use. So I think it's important just to remember that when stuff like this gets run, it's intended to kind of evoke some emotion or get us to kind of go after something or agree or support something. Idaho has lots of school choice options. As a parent and as people who have been sitting here, I love the school choice options. My children have been a part of a lot. And I'm also so grateful that we have incredible public education leaders and teachers, because as a public and as a parent, we really benefit from that.
Great. Thank you so much. So Liz, I'm going to ask you next, because when we're talking about school choice, can you talk to us about the choice options or different opportunities that folks have in part of our local community school districts? What did choice look like for you?
Yeah. I had to write them down because I was like, there's quite a few. And chime in if you can think of some more. I have down that homeschool kids are allowed to come and take credits with us for different things. At the high school, we have advanced opportunities. I'm not even sure. That might go down to the middle school also. But they have funds set aside from our legislature to use those. 2 of my boys are doing this right now. When they graduate high school, they're also going to have their associates from CSI. Super awesome programs that they can participate in. We have work release. We have hybrid classes again. This a lot of times will go along with students who have IEPs. They need to be able to do like online schooling at home, but then they still come to the school for a couple other classes because that works with whatever it is that their needs are. And I wrote this one down. I'm not quite sure if it is one, but we have a dual language immersion school. I think that's school choice that you can put in to put your child in a school where they are learning English along with another language. In our district, it's Spanish. Any others?
I would agree. We also have Falls City, which is an alternative high school, and it is expanding. And Mrs. Ferreira and the folks at Jerome Middle School have partnerships with Falls City, who we are putting, I think, about 20, don't quote me, 20 more freshmen in this year. So it is expanding as well. Stacy McFarland is the administrator there. We just hired a new social worker. Anna, I think you're in the room. Hi, Anna. So there is a lot of school choices in Jerome. We also have, our special ed programs. We have PAC rooms in our schools, and we have the day treatment program, which we call Jerome Academy now, which is, expanding and moving. So we have many school choice options for our students in special education as well.
Okay, don't sit down. So I want I know we've talked some about special education, and we know that there is a great deal of accountability for that. Broader scope, funding, reporting, documentation, all those things that tie into accountability. Talk to us a little bit about what accountability looks like in a private school setting. Maybe compare that to a public school, and then talk about House Bill 93 and the accountability concerns.
So I will tell you, we have partnerships with our private schools in town, and we do help support places like Canyonside. And we do, when I say I'm a social worker for Jerome School District, I'm a social worker for everyone in the Magic Valley. So I would say that when we talk about special education kids and and putting a dollar amount to special education, I can't put a dollar amount on it because the amount of work that goes into whether you're at Canyonside or whether you're at Jerome School District is astronomical. And it's not just special education teachers putting work into those students. It is our teachers in those classrooms who do a lot of the boots on the ground with those kids because of some of the lacks of services we have in our community. And I will tell you that we are mandated, federally mandated, on an individual education plan to provide certain things. And because of some of the lack of resources in public schools, like Speech Pass, we have to do a lot of online education, and those things cost extra. We have to contract out for psych services in order to do get the testing done. And those things cost money too, more money than having a psychologist in our building. So the extra amount of money, I can't put a dollar amount on for public school. I know our special education department serves almost 400 plus, almost 500 kids. And we put our heart and soul into that. So when you talk about money, I can't put a dollar amount on it. I can talk about teachers that do that. Of 4,000. Of our population of 4,000, we have almost 500 special education kids in our district. Services in private schools, we still support here in Jerome. So we do have partnerships with them too.
So with this bill, do you know if any of the accountability, whether for special ed or general ed or costs or expenses or reporting, will any of that transfer to private schools that are receiving these dollars? Is there an accountability mechanism for the private schools?
No. I don't have the answer to that question. The answer is no. There is an accountability, but we have an accountability to all those things through IC reporting and everything else.
Sure. And that's a pretty big fundamental difference. Private schools don't have to do that reporting because they're private, right? Public schools, because we receive public tax dollars, we've got to report down to every nickel and have a 12-page report for said nickel on how it was spent and where it was spent and why it was spent. And so the accountability threshold is quite different under House Bill 93. So I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the audience. I have a few cards that have been passed up. Does anybody else have questions? If you have a card, we've got some helpers in the room. While folks are passing those cards to our helpers, I'm going to ask the panel, thank you. I'm going to ask the panel this question. It says, now that the voucher has been passed, is it impossible to shut down? Like a snowball rolling down a mountain. Anybody want to take that?
Happy to. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that's a great question, and it's a thought that I've had too. And there are people in this room who might know better than me. I don't think that a voucher has been reversed in any state that it has been introduced to. Is that correct, or is that incorrect? Does anyone know?
We have not reversed at the state level, but we have had, thank you, we have had constitution, like ballot measures go to be able to stop vouchers from getting.
Right. So one thing I think just is a context for this legislative session, lawmakers, our House of Representative members are in for 2 years. So this first session was the first round of our House members. So this second session is going to be the second round for that. So we are going to have the exact same people in the session. So one way to make an impact is to show up at the primaries in May of 2026. Something that I think is really interesting just in terms of like voting context, that, let's see, I might get this wrong and you could correct me, or there's people in the room that I know would correct me, and I'm happy to have the correction. So I believe, and I heard from someone else on a panel member a couple of months ago, was that 80% of our election outcomes are determined by the May primaries. And roughly 28% of Idahoans vote in the May primaries, meaning that 28% of Idahoans are determining 80% of our outcomes in Idaho. I would love to see more people, more Idahoans at our primary elections, which would mean, and this is going to be the ask from Alexis, I would love for all of you on voting day in May 2026 to text 5 people that you know, did you vote today? Because we know studies show that if you just text and remind someone, you have a much higher chance of getting that person to vote. That's something that would help create a potential better outcome for us in terms of bills that are impacting us, like vouchers.
Thank you. I've got a question here. Liz, maybe you'll take this one, or you and Rachel can take it. We are all educating our future leaders. If they are getting a good education, why shouldn't parents get to use their tax dollars to choose where their child learns?
Okay. I think this would be a completely different conversation if the accountability piece was in the law. Because the public school systems, we receive those tax dollars and we account for everything. We do massive audits on our business managers. And when you look at the public or the private school and they're being handed this money, but then that's it. There's no paperwork. There's nothing being returned back. As a taxpayer, you have no idea what just happened to your tax dollars. So if the conversation were different, if there were something in that law that said, yes, they have to say exactly, like, is this going for tuition? Is this going for educational materials and supplies? Just what are you doing with money? Then I think we would have a completely different conversation, because like I said, I am for all forms of education. We need to teach our children. But when you're talking about public tax dollars, it's everyone's money. And we need to know where that money is going. Because the flip side of that is then, if that type of schooling doesn't work out and those kids wind up back in the public education system or a public charter school, we don't have funds for the rest of that school year to educate that kid. And so then that means everyone else's kids have to take a little bit less, because we are pulling from our discretionary funds, from our savings accounts, in order to get that money, not the money, but to get the resources back out to those kids and to support the teachers. All those things are all tied together. So I think this conversation wouldn't be happening if we had the accountability piece in it, in the law. And I think moving forward, even though I don't know that we can get rid of vouchers, I do think we can change the law and make that a piece. And that's something that we will just have to be very vocal about moving forward. Again, if you study what's happening in Utah, that is what they are starting to do. They are starting to put some limits. They are starting to put wording in to make people more accountable. Like, you can't just go out and buy golf clubs for your student because that's PE class time. You have to, they have certain limits and thresholds for what they consider to be educational materials versus what is just a lot of fun. To have all this climbing gear to go up in the mountains and go climbing at any time, that sort of thing. Nice things to have, but that is one class, that is one piece of your child's education. You still have a whole lot of other subjects to cover. And did you spend your money responsibly? We can't put limits on all of that, but we can at least start to set some groups and start to show parents what it really costs to educate children.
And so those limits of materials purchase or having a pre-approved list of what some of the curriculum supports would look like, you're talking about Utah is just now putting them on, but we currently, Idaho,
having the conversation.
Correct. Idaho does not have any.
We don't have any.
I wanted to talk a little bit just for a second because the question says, why can't a parent take their tax dollars and go someplace else? I want to make sure that we understand where the funding is coming from. And there's another question up here that talks about like what pot of money that it's coming from. So the $50 million is coming from the general fund. So the general fund is like the state's savings account, right? It's the state's bank. It's like where these things are going out of. So there are different pots of money, and if they cancel a program, so on the very last days of session, they got rid of something called Empowering Parents. That was something that came about during COVID when we were all home and scrambling and folks needed computers or Wi-Fi because we were all teaching from home, me included. And so as we were doing that, the state, through some federal funds, created a pot of money that families could access tutor support, materials, maybe tech, etc. So that money has been in that fund. Well, on the last day of session, when it was $30 million ongoing general fund money. So they have retired the program. So that $30 million is going back into the big pot of money and already being earmarked to expand House Bill 93. So this general fund. But when it comes to our taxes, and this is something that I really had to dig into, how do our taxes get to the big pot of money, get to the general fund? We have sales tax and income tax and property tax. The only tax that each one of us can put your fingers on, like touch it with your hands, that this is going to the Jerome School District, is through property taxes. So I brought my assessment notice. You all probably got your assessment notice in the last week or so, right? They all went out by county. And on there, it tells you how much money you pay in taxes to your local school district. So that's our bonds and levies. Bonds are failing, right? Bonds means buildings, like to build our buildings, and they're failing across the state. But Jerome, y'all passed one in 2022. Good work. Right? That's amazing, yeah. So when I look at because I looked up, okay, like what's the average home price in Idaho? It's horrifying, right? As we know, right, what the prices are, very high. So in Jerome, average property taxes are around $1,500, around, right? That's the middle of the road. So when I pulled mine, I live in Boise, so it's around $2,100, and so I pay $638.26 to the Boise School District. That I can touch with my hand. So when we're talking about take your taxes and go someplace else and do something else for your students, I want us to really be conscious of the amount of money that we pay in to the school district directly. The other taxes, if we're talking about sales tax and income tax, that's a little more nebulous, a little harder to get our hands around, because then it falls into public service. If I decide to start, to use private security at my house, I don't bill the city or the county because I didn't use police services. Please refund me my taxes. I don't drive the roads up near Camas County. I'm very rarely in Boundary County. I don't ask for that money returned for the roads, right? I've never had firefighters at my house. Everybody knock on wood. I don't ask for my taxes returned. These are public services that serve the community and serve the state, and public education is definitely one of those. So This question talks about monitoring students and academic goals. So I don't know, Rachel, do you want to take this one? Talking about homeschool students. If they take the tax credit, how are we monitoring academic goals that it's required in public schools, especially if they have IEP goals, even in private schools? So private schools, homeschools, how are we monitoring said progress?
You can go. Well, the quick answer is they're not.
They're not. Okay.
I could dive a little deeper, but I promise to stay in my lane this panel. But they're not. They don't have to report. And we have to report progress monitoring every month. We go through progress monitoring of those IEP goals with teachers in our MTSS meetings and in our IEP meetings. And we're mandated to report. We're mandated to be accountable to those students, those parents, to our taxpayers, that we're raising the bar and we're meeting those goals. And often they're not easy to meet. So private schools are not mandated to report and be accountable.
So for the panel up here, and I'm watching our time because we have some guests in the room that are elected officials from this legislative district, and I want to make sure we give them a minute to speak. We have several cards that are talking about private religious schools. So with this new law, money can go to private religious schools. Is there any part of this law that requires the school to accept a student from another religion? If not, isn't that taxpayer-funded religious discrimination?
Okay. Yeah, so any type of private school can determine who they want to admit and who they are not going to admit. So I could even say from my personal experience that my family, we applied to get my daughter in when she was in elementary school at a Christian school. And I will tell you that we were the wrong kind of Christian. So we were rejected from that school. And there were letters written in, and there were letters read during the conversation at the Capitol of other families who had that experience. It was also, I will never forget this, we were in I believe it was the committee on the House side, and a leader from a private school, a private religious school, was asked, would you take a student from this particular religion? And the response was, we will take students from our brand of religion. That was it. So, and then I also think it's like, to the question, you can then assess, well, public dollars are going for private schools and those private religious schools. And there are no accountability pieces and there are no limits on where there's schools, who can take and what, and all those types of things. So you can draw those conclusions as you come down the line for that.
There's a follow-up question here, and maybe Liz, you can take it. Again, there's several on religious schools. So it was talking about some of the legal bills or challenges we might incur based on that if someone is denied enrollment or they're not allowed into a school based on any of those religious choices or a disability or what have you. It was saying, have we thought about the cost for the legal bills that will come from this and where the funds ultimately coming from if we have legal battles moving forward?
No. I don't know that we have the best answer to that. I guess my mind doesn't trend that way because we're a public school. We take everyone. So that hasn't something I've been putting thought to, but I have read some articles from past circuit judges that are commentating in Boise that we do have separation of church and state in this nation. However, the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that a state has autonomy. So when a particular state decides we're going to change and we're going to allow that to happen, which has now happened in Idaho with House Bill 93, now that has opened the door and the lawmakers have made that law, now in any part or sector of our Idaho government, those religious organizations can start making challenges all around. That was my understanding from this particular circuit judge when he was trying to explain the difference with separation of church and state, and that the states each have their autonomy to do that. And that is now here in Idaho. So your public schools might be asked to hold events that you don't feel great about or have in your community, and there might be very little that we can do without threat of a lawsuit. So that is something that is a repercussion that we are still looking at and we are still trying to get to the bottom of. We just had our education law seminar in April, and we had a list of questions. And I'll tell you right now, our educational lawyers were like, we'll get back to you because we have questions also, because we're setting new precedents as we are moving along down this pathway with allowing this bill in.
Okay. And we did have a question on that separation of church and state. Somebody submitted saying, like, where would I find this government document with this position? And so I'm assuming that means in respect to this bill if we're talking about the funding. So Article 9, Section 5 of the Idaho Constitution. Neither the legislature nor any county, city, town, township, school district, or other public corporation shall ever make any appropriation or pay from any public fund or monies, whatever, anything in aid of any church or sectarian or religious society or any sectarian or religious purpose, or to help support or sustain any school, academy, seminary, college, university, or other literary or scientific institution controlled by any church, sectarian, or religious denomination whatsoever. That's from the Idaho State Constitution. So we are anticipating legal battles over this, as we have seen in other states.
I believe the Blaine Amendment is already back in court,
So
it's already here.
on that, the last question I'll have from the cards, and then I'll introduce our electeds, was talking about how will this impact public school funds if an expansion is to go forward. So right now we know it's $50 million from the general fund. How does this potentially impact public schools if expansion goes forward?
Sure. I had it. Okay.
So I just recently saw that down in, I believe it was Arizona, they have a very, very high threshold for their vouchers. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And teachers are actually being told right now that the state that already paid out for all of those vouchers does not have enough funds to pay teachers right now for the month of June. That was just in the news. You can go check it out. So that is one, as you look down the road, what are other people, how are other states experiencing this? That's one thing to remember, to note, that we can see what a potential future is because some states are already living that, unless we do something about it. Be positive about this, unless we do something about it. When we talk about how can this impact, and I know Liz is going to say something here in a second too, these funds that come in, I heard Senator Cook explain this, and it's one of my favorites. When we talk about funding and we have this big, huge pot of money, the tax credits go first, like the grocery tax credit. Those tax credits go first, and that includes the voucher. So as the money comes in, grocery tax goes out, vouchers, our tax credit goes out, so that pot just gets a little bit smaller. This is our general fund. So then after that, we have the departments in the state, the governor, they'll say, okay, you're going to set your budget. So the Department of Education sets their budget, the Department of Labor, all those people set their budget, and then they submit it to the legislature, and then the legislature, JFAC first, Sonia's on JFAC, they determine what that's going to be, and then the legislature votes on that. So during COVID, a couple of years ago, the governor said, I need every department to lower their budget, reduce their budget by 3%. Department of Ed, reduce their budget. Department of Ed, everyone reduce their budget by 3%. Now, let's say, bless you, let's say in 3 years that our governor says, I need everyone to reduce their budgets by 5%. Department of Ed reduces their budget by 5%. That means that's 5% less than what's going to go out to Jerome District, to my kid's school district, West Ada, to Minidoka. Everything's going to get reduced by 5%. But Remember when I said what goes out first? The tax credits go out first. So that voucher, that tax credit that we have in Idaho, that does not get touched. Those people are going to get their money right away. They will not have to decrease by 5% if in X number of years the governor tells us, I need you to reduce your budgets. Vouchers do not get reduced. So therefore, our public schools, our charter schools, everything that falls under that category are deeply impacted. And the tax credits for the vouchers are not impacted at all. And I think that's a really important distinction to make when we're talking about impact of money. Do you want something else?
Will you repeat the question?
So the question was talking about what would be the likely impact in school districts and public schools if there's an expansion?
Okay. So ultimately, there's just less money that we can ask for as a public school to help us with our services. And I just want to give you a couple examples of things that I have seen as I have traveled around to our various schools and the things that have stuck with me. It was a second grade class at Horizon, and I noticed this little boy had these cups sitting on the bottom of his chair. Do they have a professional name? I don't know if they have a professional name. Anyways, they're like moon shoes for a chair. So if you can imagine those old rocking chairs that had the springs on them, and kids could sit there and rock. That was essentially what this boy is doing. He's sitting at his desk with this accommodation, and he's sitting there, and it is helping him stay focused. It is helping him stay in his classroom with his peers as he listens to the teacher. I want to, and then move over to another classroom. Actually, it was one of our behavior rooms, and a kid came in, and he was just beside himself, and our amazing paras were sitting there talking with him the best they could, letting him have his space, and then just a couple of minutes of conversation just between her and I, he fell asleep, and he just needed those couple of minutes to let go of whatever was happening in his life at that moment. He needed that space to take a quick nap, and then within 15 minutes, he woke himself up. It wasn't the paras, and they started immediately in with him to have a conversation and to get him back to his classroom, which happened almost immediately. But this is a separate space that is created within the school to help these kids accommodate with the things that are going on in their life. And I want to give you one last example from my own life about being a product of the public schools. I was one of those families, I belonged to one of those families that was on the line. We didn't qualify for free lunch. We were qualified for reduced lunch, but that didn't often mean that my parents were able to keep up with the school lunch balance, especially when there were other more pressing bills that had to be paid. I stood in line with my peers around me, having to listen that your account is overdue, or your account is getting close to zero. I had to deal with those feelings and the realities of when there is not enough money to take care of our children. I know there are a lot of asks, that there are a lot of needs in our state. But right now, underfunding our public schools in any form or fashion is something that I will continue to show up for, and I will continue to be around to help as much as I can do. Right now, we have a tough legislature to work with. But I have hope that we will find those people who can serve and can stand in those positions, stand in my very own position, come be a trustee, come participate, come volunteer at the schools, see the things that we see, and I hope that your opinion and your thoughts about education, about how funding is run, all those things in our state that you'll just get a little bit better opinion about, and we can continue to have these conversations, because the more we talk and work with each other, the better solutions that we're able to find. And I truly hope that for these next couple of years. We got some tough years ahead of us, But I'm so grateful that you're all here to help us with this conversation.
So I promised my kids I'd keep my blood pressure down today. So I'm watching my watch, making sure it doesn't go up. So I think I'll try to say this kindly. I think once you've got our schools, you've got our towns. So if we want to talk about the things that are going to go away, the art program's going away. The CTE program's going away. The beautiful greenhouse we built at Jerome Middle School is going away. Our homecoming parades are going away. Football field, that brand new gym we built, Jerry Cowan Memorial Tournament during Christmas, that's going away. So once we start giving money to our schools, we're going to have all kinds of opportunities that we have for our children. We're building, the programs we're building, they're gone. We just have to provide the basics, math, reading, language, and we all know how much fun those things are, right? So let's talk about putting our dollars back into our public schools. And I was thinking about, over the last couple of days, about how to explain this to my neighbors. You know, the guy that's getting up at 4 in the morning and fixing the pivot that's stuck in the ditch, you know, and he's like, he's got to get it out because he needs that crop for money. So when we talk about vouchers and what it does to schools, it's a slow bleed. So I want to reframe it for our farmers and our dairymen and our people that help build this community and maintain the infrastructure in this community. Our schools are like irrigation canals. When you start cutting off water to serve someone else's field, the crops don't grow here. Vouchers do the same thing. They dry out our communities, one budget cut at a time. And once the well runs dry, it's a long road to bring it back. So I want us to think about that.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have some special guests, and so Liz had mentioned the importance of our elected officials and representation. Jerome, you're very lucky to have some incredible elected officials here, and I want to introduce them. They are my colleagues and folks that I am privileged to do the work of Idaho with down at the State House. Representative Jack Nelson, Senator Ron Taylor, and Representative Mike Pahanka, would you come up? And if you want to say hello, we would invite you to say hello.
How much hello do you want?
You get 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay, I was told to come in and say why I voted against House Bill 93, and I think I can get that done in a couple of minutes. First, I'm fiscally conservative. To stand on the corner and pass out $5,000 checks with no strings attached, to me, that's pretty ridiculous. To me, this is a new program. It subsidizes private religious schools with public money. There's no oversight, no long-term funding strategy. Let me repeat, no long-term funding strategy, and there's no clear return on investment. It's a great idea, and let's throw some money out the door. To me, this isn't just big government, it's really irresponsible government. To me, this country was settled back in the day by people that weren't moving to some place with state-sponsored religion. They were getting away from places with state-sponsored religion, and they wanted nothing to do with government-sponsored churches. That's made America, I think, pretty great for 250 years. I'm not about to sit and change directions on that. The violation that's already come up, it's just simply a violation of what our country's founded on, a separation of church and state. Once you pick a religion, then somebody else's religion can be picked. Probably what wasn't brought out much here today is the divide between urban and rural taxpayers and funds. Vast majority of this money is going to go to people in the Treasure Valley that already attend private schools. Rural people like Jerome Valley, our communities here, we're at a disadvantage anyway. If you don't think so, take a look at how schools are funded and the bonding. Off the top of my head, which the numbers probably aren't hard, is no two school districts have the same amount of taxable property. I think Ada County or Ada school system, if I have $100,000 of value, so we're talking apples to apples, I owe 50 some bucks. In Blaine County, I think it's $150. Jerome, if you look around, we've got some large processing plants that pay a lot of taxes. It's somewhere around $1,500 for Jerome if you have $100,000 of taxable. You go down to Valley, who just kicked over a school bond, and I think it's somewhere around $18,000 is what everybody with $100,000 has to pay. Sonia came up with a really neat spreadsheet that shows all that. If you have any questions, get a hold of her. It's quite the read. If you do it between ability and effort, people can make a huge effort. And if you got nothing to tax, it's hard to build much of anything. So that's a really big deal. And I think the other thing to bring out if you're in the middle of politics is if you think the logic behind this 93 is just wacko, you know, who in the world would come up with this kind of logic? It's really not that big a stretch. It was mentioned a few billionaires have pumped a relatively not very many millions of dollars into Idaho. The Freedom Foundation sits, if you're in the legislature, they rate bills. When the rating goes up, why, this is a plus bill, all the usual suspects, they vote for it. It really doesn't matter if it helps their community or not. To me, water is, that's what we do here. A bunch of my colleagues voted against it, and they really didn't have any good reasons for it. After talking through it, it's just, you know, if you really looked, well, that bill happened to be rated as a negative, so they all voted negative. Same way with vouchers. So to me, the real issue comes back. I'm fine being censored. I actually almost think it's kind of a compliment. I have a brain, I think, and I don't just blindly follow things. The Idaho Constitution, to sit and take censorship because I'm not going to sign a party platform that says we've got to give public money to private religious schools, I'm really comfortable with that. But the issue is when 20-some% of the people vote in a primary election, if you care at all, maybe you ought to show up. So thank you.
Thank you, Ron Taylor, the state senator for this district. Thanks for inviting us here today. It's nice to see so many people that are interested in what's going on. I voted against this particular bill, and I don't think I can add much more to what has been said here today. There's been a lot of very, very good points made. My biggest concern with this is the lack of accountability. We hold our public schools and our public school teachers accountable for every penny that they spend. We hold them accountable for what they display in their classrooms. We hold them accountable for what they can and cannot teach. Now my dollars, your dollars, are going towards schools where we have no accountability. They can teach whatever they want. They can fly a banner. They can have a poster. They can use a particular text or whatever they want. We have no control over that now. I wonder what that will do when it comes to educating our children. Will it be a full, rounded education, or will it be more of a focused, possible indoctrination? And that is something that really, really concerns me with this bill going forward. But it gives me hope knowing that we have people who would really like to try and figure out how to stick everything back into Pandora's box, because that's what we're going to try and work on. So thank you.
Mike Pohanka, District 26, Jerome, Lincoln, and Blaine counties. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting us and having us be part of it. You know, I'm a product of public education. My wife is a product of public education. Our two children are products of public education here in Jerome. Both of them great careers and doing incredibly well. Our grandkids are products of public education. And they're all doing extremely well. I opposed House Bill 93 for several reasons. Moving public dollars to private schools, and just as what it was talked about before, no accountability. I feel there has to be some sort of an accountability on there. Public schools they are responsible and have to account for every penny that comes in I feel if our money, my money, is going to go there, I want to see the same thing. I want to see accountability. Another thing that came about, Debbie Critchfield, elected superintendent of public schools, was not even a part of this, which you would think the Department of Education and superintendent of public schools, she would be involved. Not involved in on it. Now we have the Idaho State Tax Commission overseeing an education program, which kind of worries me a little bit there as well. First, they said they would need 2 people. First, they're not going to grow government. We grew it by 50 million. Second is we're only going to need 2 positions. By the end of the legislature, we need 7 more for a total of 9. So they grew as far as in the tax commission. Now we need a total of 9 auditors. So they talk about not growing government. We did grow government. As I mentioned, came through JFAC. Private schools, not to say, and it was discussed, who they can pick with, who they want to come in. You know, some private schools may not have the special teachers that are needed for that child. I look at small school districts, Cary, where if they want to send their child to a private school, where do they go in Cary? Dietrich, Richfield, Shoshone, over in Valley. Jerome, you have the opportunities of Canyonside Christian School, or maybe send them over to Twin. But these other small school districts, pardon me?
Precepts Christian Academy.
Okay, thank you. Precepts Christian Academy, that they can send their child to. Kind of threw me there, what I was going to say on there. But as far as special needs, looked at as far as Valley School District. One of the things I want to see, and I know I've had people say, what do you mean? I want to see how testing compares. I know there's standardized testing for public schools. There should be a somewhat standardized testing for private. I'd like to see how that comes across the board. I want to see, how we have checks and balances. Let's have that standardized testing there. And my gut's telling me, and I'll oppose it again, I'll fight against, they're going to come back with, and it was talked about, $80 million, $100 million. Our public school systems are going to slowly get gutted. And I just can't see that happen. Like I says, my wife and I, our kids, our grandkids are all products of public school and have done and are doing extremely phenomenally well. And so I just I'll continue to fight for public education. And thank you. I want to thank Sonia and the panel for having us here, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our elected. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for our elected folks. I did want to give the panel a chance, and we've got the time to give their closing remarks, but I wanted to make sure that this room knows that it's not a hypothetical where we talk about expansion. This isn't theory. This is reality. We already have a very strong lobby group in the Freedom Foundation that is saying, hey, that $30 million from the empowering parents that you repealed, that needs to go to the voucher. How about we take the governor's early literacy initiative, $35 million, and put it towards the voucher? So that early literacy initiative has helped districts like Jerome pay for full-time kindergarten, which has increased our kindergarten readiness. Our kids are on a better footing for first grade and second grade, and so that would remove those funds. They've also flagged the $80 million for the launch, which is our workforce development, getting our high school kids into programs, career tech, something right away. That's $80 million they would pull back. And then the last was they flagged the $60 million of discretionary funds, $60 million for the entire state, all of our school districts, where they have that money to be able to meet the needs of their individual students. Remember the kiddo that costs a little bit more? That's the pot that they pull from. They said claw back their discretionary funds and put it to the voucher. So once again, this is not hypothetical. These are things in black and white that you can look up. These are real threats. And so we want to make sure that we go into this with our eyes wide open and make sure we have our head in the game for May 2026, where hopefully we can recalibrate just a bit. I will give the panel just a minute to close if they have any closing statements.
So I grew up on a family farm, and my husband grew up on his family farm, actually just right down the road, exit 201, which is Kasota Road exit, he went to Minico High School, and his family helped settle the Magic Valley. They came here around 1905 and helped dig the canals here in the Magic Valley. He is a product of public education, and I am a product of public education. And several years ago, I was on the Lewiston School Board, and I loved living in Lewiston, and I loved being able to connect with people in that community. And I knew what it meant as a school board member when we would have to go ask our community members for funds. And it was really, and Liz has done such a lovely job conveying this, it was a really important part in my role to make sure that we were using our public funds appropriately. And we asked when it was appropriate to our local community, and we expressed gratitude, and we're so grateful for that. This voucher that's in Idaho, and with the potential and work to expand in Idaho, will mean that there is less public funds for our local schools, which means that it is more pressure on our local community members to meet the needs of the kids in our community. I heard a representative share, who was from Pocatello, that his family settled that area. And when they settled that area, there were a lot of other farmers that settled that area, and they wanted to educate their kids. But they couldn't individually educate them, so they came together and as a public created a school to help educate their kids. And that's what it means to be a public, to come together to help educate our kids. And so it is so important, I believe, for us to make sure that in May of 2026, we help get our public, our community, out to those polls, because our Idaho kids matter. They can't get to those polls. My 16 and 17-year-olds, when they were that age, they reminded me that, Mom, I can't vote yet, but you can, and you can vote on behalf of me. And so I think it is so important for us to show up for our kids, because they need us to do that for them.
I did want to highlight some of the positives and the great things that are happening in the Jerome School District. Not only do we have phenomenal teachers, administration, and staff, we just attended, Peter is also a trustee with me, we attended our graduations for both the high school and for Falls City Academy. Falls City Academy, our alternative high school, had over 30 graduates, and these are students who are recovering credits. Some of them have children, and incredible life stories. If you take a minute to attend these functions and come say hi to them and talk to them, you will be absolutely astonished at the things that they have been able to take in their life and just turn. And I bet every single one of them would turn right around and say, this teacher helped me. This person cared about me. This administrator would not give up on me. I know also in our high school, we've had 2 classes now. We just finished our second year of the CNA program in conjunction with our local hospitals to get these kids certifications so that they can leave high school and already start into job programs and start to take care of themselves, start to return the investment back into our own communities. We have our CTE programs, which is career technical education. So that's your shop welding classes. It can be greenhouse management. We do have the largest greenhouse in Idaho, right here in Jerome. Just these programs are showing the kids what they can do, what they're capable of, and what their potential is. And like I stated, every single one of them would have a story. My 7th and 8th grade science teacher was one of my favorite teachers, and he was one of my not favorite teachers. And I credit that to 7th grade, you really like middle school, and then 8th grade. Ugh, that is a tough grade and a tough time of life too. But now, as a school trustee, I have gone back to him when I've been in Wisconsin, and he is now the superintendent of that school. And I have sat in his office twice now and been on the phone with him multiple times. He is my mentor. I have gone back to him through the years. I have not forgotten him. Because that is the impression that he has made on my life. And I know that in our school district, we are doing awesome and amazing things like that. We are not failing our kids. I really don't like that thing. We are not failing our kids. We are working through very difficult, tough, adulting situations and the curveballs that get thrown to us. And these kids continue to outshine and produce. And it is a glorious thing to see. And I would invite you at any time, please come and visit your school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Public schools are the heartbeat of rural communities. When you got our public schools, you got our towns. Kids growing up in the alfalfa fields and on the athletic fields. It's all part of where we live in Jerome. So I invite you into our public schools. I invite you in to meet with me afterwards and ask any question you would like to ask. I'm not sure I'll have the answer. But Liz is right. We were trying very hard to answer all the difficult questions and work through all the problems, that we have. But we have a lot of highlights that she mentioned as well. And I know we talked about Falls City a lot tonight, but even Jerome High School and Jerome Middle School and the dual immersion program and all the elementaries. And I can't say enough about our amazing administrators who work sun up to sundown, making sure that our schools are safe and everyone is welcome. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming out on a Saturday afternoon. I want to draw your attention to, I know you saw it when you came in, not $1 more. Our friends here at Save Our Schools, we are trying to get 1,000 signatures in each legislative district to let folks know and let our public schools know that we are going to stand firm and fight against an expansion of House Bill 93 and make sure we are protecting public education. Thank you very much for your time here today. If you want to chat with the panel, we'll hang back a little bit, but have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Jerome.
From the Idaho convention for homeschoolers, and they are passing this out, saying do not accept any money, do not accept any tax credits, do not accept any money from the government. And I am Dr. Diane Davis. I am with Precepts Christian Academy and Aletheia Christian College. We will not accept any money as far as we can find out. Jack knows me, Mike knows me. We will not accept any money because we do not want any kind of intervention. And we want you to understand that this is what's going around Idaho. Don't accept Idaho money. In the homeschool movement, I just came from there and got this. So if you would like some, I have 4 that I got.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you.